for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately. But I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science for life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut fillet crackling?
Yes, sir.
Oh. By the way, then, I see that from your books, there's on Thursday night Lord Shawman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me. 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that in a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink all the champagne? Ask me for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households, the champagne is really of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, is marriage as demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a pleasant state, sir. I have very little experience of it myself up to the present. I've only been married once. That was a consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't think I'm too much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It's not a very interesting subject. I don't think of it myself.
Yes, very natural, I'm sure. And that will do, Lane, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the law orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem as a class to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Earnest Webb.
Ernest, how are you? What brings you up to town?
Pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, LG.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshments at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are these people you amuse?
Neighbours.
I've got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire.
Perfectly horrid. I never speak to one of them.
How immense you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire. Oh, yes, of course. Hello. Why all these teacups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance when one so young? Who is coming to tea?
No, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
Perfectly delightful.
It's all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
I'm in love with Gwendolyn. I've come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you'd come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love. There is nothing romantic in a definite proposal. Why, one may be expected. One usually is, I believe. But then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear LG. The divorce courts were specially invented for people whose memories were so curiously constituted.
No, there's no doubting the subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Oh, please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered especially for Aunt Augusta.
You've been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. I have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is too.
Well, you need not eat as if you're going to eat at all. You behave as if you're married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
May I ask why?
Well, in the first place, the girls never marry the men they flirt with. The girls don't think it's right.
Well, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors that one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent.
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you'll have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What do you mean, LG, by Cecily? I don't know anyone by the name of Cecily.
Bring me the cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to the Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I really wish it would. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There's no good offering a reward now the thing is found.
I think it's rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter. For now that I look at the inscription inside, I find the thing's in yours after all.
Of course it is mine. You've seen me with it 100 times. And you've no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to do, to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of one culture depends on what one should read.
I'm aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't at all the sort of thing one talks of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone with the name of Cecily, and you said you don't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you must know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming lady. She lives at Tunbridge Wells.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt that lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
Well, some aunts are tall, and some aunts are not tall. That is surely a matter an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that all aunts should be like your aunt, which is absurd. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but why does your own aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle. I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Earnest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
But you have always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer the name of Ernest. You look as if your name were Ernest. You were the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It is absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. It's one of them. Excuse me, dear fellow. It's a bit tricky. Here. Mr. Ernest Worthing, V4 for Albany. I shall keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if you ever attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town, but Jack in the country. And the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
But that still does not account for the fact that your aunt calls you her uncle. Come on, old boy, you'd much better have the whole thing out at once.
Ilgi, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one is not a dentist. It produces a false impression.
That's exactly what dentists always do. Go on, tell me, why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country? I may mention that I've always suspected you of being confirmed and secret sponsorist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
A what?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is, and now produce your explanation. And pray make it improbable.
There is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle, for motives of respect you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country, under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
And where is that in the country, by the way?
That's nothing to you, dear boy. You I'm not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that it is not in Shropshire.
No, I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have wandered all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. But go on, tell me, why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
I hardly think you'll be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. But when one is placed in the position of guardian, one must adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. But as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much either to one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Earnest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. In fact, you are the most advanced Bunburyist I know. You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest in order that you may be able to go into the country whenever you choose. I have invented a perfectly invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable to me. In fact, if it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You're absurdly careless about sending out dinner invitations. It's very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people more than not receiving dinner invitations.
You had much better dine with your aunt.
I haven't the remotest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family, and set down with either no women at all, or 2. In third place, I know perfectly well whom she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. It's not very pleasant. It's not even decent. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands in public is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It's simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you are a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, I'll naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you all the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. In fact, if Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. In fact, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily seems a little too much interested in him. It's rather a bore. So, I'm going to get rid of Earnest, and I strongly advise you do the same with your your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury, and if you ever were to get married, which seems extremely problematic, you'll be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time with it.
Nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she's the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize, old boy, that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
Don't try and be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
No, it isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such lots of peace and competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Now, if I get you out of the way for 10 minutes, so that you can have an opportunity of proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you at Willis's tonight?
I suppose so. If you want to.
Good evening, and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you've been behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
It's not quite the same thing. In fact, the 2 things rarely go together.
Dear me, you're smart.
I'm always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
I hope I am not that. But that will leave no room for development. And I intend to develop in every direction. I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbour. I haven't been to visit since her poor husband's death. I've never seen a woman so altered. She looked quite 20 years younger. And now, I'll have a cup of tea and one of those lovely cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Gwendolyn, won't you come and sit over here? I'm quite fine where I am, thanks, Mamma.
Good heavens, Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers.
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some comforts with Lady Harbury. She seems to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold with grief.
Certainly has changed its colour. From what cause, I, of course, cannot say. I have a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She is such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It is delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I should hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs again. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
Oh, it is a great bore, and need hardly I say a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I've just had a telegram saying that my poor friend Bunbury is quite ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It's very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I think it high time, Algernon, that this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the business is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of this modern sympathy with invalids. Illness is hardly something that should be encouraged with others. Health is the primary duty of life. I am forever telling that to my poor husband, but he never seems to take much notice, as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. So I would be very much obliged, Algernon, if you were to tell this Mr. Bunbury from me, if you were to be kind enough not to have a relapse this Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has already said whatever it is they've had to say, which in most cases is probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he's still conscious. And I think I can promise you he'll be quite right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen. If one plays bad music, people don't talk. But we'll run over the program I've drawn out, if you'll kindly follow me into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. I'm sure the program will be delightful, after a few explications. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me. Certainly, Mamma. French songs I cannot possibly.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Hey, don't talk to me about the weather. For whenever people talk to me about the weather, I feel quite certain that they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Gwendolyn, ever since I met you, I've admired you more than any other girl I have met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite well aware of the fact, although I had often wished that in public, at any rate, you would have been more demonstrative. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals, and my ideal has always been to love somebody by the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires one with absolute confidence. Why? The moment Algernon first told me he had a friend named Earnest, I knew that I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn.
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
But You don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest?
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, but supposing it was something else.
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And like most, metaphysical speculation has very little relevance to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Really, darling, I don't think the name Earnest suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It produces a music of its own. It has vibrations.
Gwendolyn, really, to speak quite candidly, I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for example, a charming name.
Jack? Oh no. There is very little music in the name Jack, if only at all. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious only woman who is married. We are allowed to know the entrancing pleasures of a single moment's solitude. Safe name is Earnest.
Darling, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know I adore you, and you led me to believe you weren't entirely indifferent to me.
I adore you, Mr. Worthing, but nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on. Besides, you haven't proposed to me yet.
May I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment beforehand, I think it's only fair to tell you that I am fully determined to accept.
Gwendolyn.
Say to me,
You know what I have got to say to you.
yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn. Will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it. I was beginning to feel that you have had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one. I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. All my girlfriends tell me so. Oh, what wonderfully blue eyes you have, Earnest. They are quite blue. I hope you'll always look at me just like that, especially when others are present.
Mr. Worthing! Myself in the semi-recumbent posture is most indecorous. And Gwendolyn, do up your jacket. I did not raise my daughter to show off her undergarments.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
Mr. Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
Pardon me, young lady, but you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. As an engagement should come as a surprise on a young girl, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter she could be allowed to decide for herself. Now, Mr. Worthing, I have a few questions to put to you. While I am making these inquiries, Gwendolyn, you will wait for me below in the carriage.
But Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolyn! Gwendolyn, the carriage! You may take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Lady Bracknell, I prefer to stand.
I need hardly tell you, Mr. Worthing, that you are not down of my list of eligible young men. I have the same list as the Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I would be quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a truly affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I must admit I spoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29, madame.
Very good age to be married at. I've always been of the opinion, Mr. Worthing, that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or investments?
Investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be a profit or a pleasure.
I do have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it. About 1,500 acres. But I don't depend on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only ones that get anything out of it.
A country house?
Yes.
How many bedrooms? Well, that is a matter that can be cleared up later. You do have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I have a house in Belgrave Square. But it is let to Lady Bloxham.
Lady Bloxham?
Yes.
I don't know her.
She goes about very little. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Well, nowadays, that is hardly a guarantee for respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I knew there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
But both, if necessary, I would presume. Mr. Worthing, what are your politics?
I'm afraid, Lady Bracknell, I really have none.
Very good. And now, to minor matters, are your parents living?
I'm afraid, Lady Bracknell, that I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who is your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth.
Lady Bracknell, when I said that I had lost my parents, well, it would be nearer to the truth to say my parents seemed to have lost me. I was found.
Found?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman with a considerably charitable and kind disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It's a seaside resort.
And where did this charitable gentleman who had a first-class ticket to a seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. A large leather handbag with handles to it. An ordinary brown leather handbag, in fact.
And in what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
Yes, it was given to him in mistake for his own. The Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I must confess that I'm somewhat bewildered by what you've just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life. that reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution, and I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As to the particular locality of the handbag, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion. It has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now, but it can hardly be regarded as an assured basis for recognized position in good society.
May I ask then, Lady Bracknell, what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
I don't see how I can do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It's in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you.
Me, sir? What on earth has this to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parson. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning, Lady. For heaven's sake, Algy! Don't play that ghastly tune! What an idiot you are!
Didn't you go off right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you. I notice the way she has. She's always refusing people. I think it goes to your nature of her.
Gwendolyn is right as a trivet. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. I've never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is. But Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she's a monster without being a myth, which is somewhat unfair. I apologize, Algy. I shouldn't talk of your own relations in such a manner before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing of my relations abused. This is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the smallest knowledge of how to live, nor the slightest instinct about when to die.
That is nonsense.
It isn't?
Well, I won't argue about things. You're always arguing about things.
Well, that is exactly what things were originally made for.
For heaven's sake. If I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think that there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does, and that is his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased and quite as true as anything in civilized life should be.
I can't abide cleverness. Everybody's clever nowadays. Things become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have.
I should really like to meet some. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, have you told Gwendolyn yet about your being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't at all the sort of thing one speaks to a nice, kind, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about how to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
That is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Before the end of the week, I shall have got rid of Earnest. I'll say he was carried off in Paris by apoplexy. People are always dying quite suddenly of apoplexy, aren't they, nowadays?
Yes, but that's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You'd much better say a severe chill.
You're quite sure that isn't hereditary or anything of the kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well. My brother Earnest, carried off in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But didn't you say that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother. Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Cecily isn't some silly romantic girl. She goes on long walks, has a capital appetite, and pays absolutely no attention to her lessons.
I should rather like to meet Cecily.
I shall take very good care you never do. She's excessively pretty, and only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who's only just 18?
One doesn't blurt these things. Gwendolyn and Cecily are sure to be... I bet you anything that within half an hour they'll be calling each other sister.
Yes. Well, women only do that after they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, if we want to get a good table at Willis's tonight, we really must go and get dressed. Do you know it's nearly 7?
It's always nearly 7.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn!
Algy,
On my word!
kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
I don't think I can allow this at all, Gwendolyn.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You are not quite old enough to do so. My own one, we may never be married. I fear from the expression on Mamma's face that we never shall. Very few parents these days pay very little attention to what their children say to them. The traditions of respect for the young is fast dying out. Any influence I had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. And although I may marry, and marry often, there is nothing that she can do that can alter my eternal devotion to you. The story of your romantic origin, as related to being my mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination, and the simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your address in town I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Walton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That will require some serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily. How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Great. Algy, you may turn around now.
No, I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will allow me to see you to your carriage?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunbury.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You can put up my smoking jacket, dress suits, and all the Bunbury things.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
Never is, sir.
Lane, you are one of the most, if not the most, pessimistic people I ever knew in my life.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
Now there's a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry. What on earth is so amusing?
Oh, I'm a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that's all.
If you don't take very good care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
Oh, I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
That is nonsense. You never talk anything but nonsense, Elgie.
Nobody ever does.
Cecily, your German grammar is on the table. Pray, open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian gets that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German as he is leaving for town.
Uncle Jack is very serious. Sometimes he is so serious I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanour should be especially commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
Yes, I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily! I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I do wish that Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here and visit sometime. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know German and geology, and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I do not think even I could produce an effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admissions, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. As a man sows, so shall he reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter all of the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that haven't happened yet, and can't possibly have happened. I think that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that are sent us.
Do not speak slightingly of a 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote it myself an earlier day.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How clever you are. I do hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so. But it seems terribly unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. Unfortunately, the manuscript is abandoned. I use the words in a sense of lost and mislaid. But too childish speculations are populous.
But I see Dr. Chatterbolt coming up through the garden.
Dear Dr. Chatterbolt, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chatterbolt.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
Yes, I know that, Miss Prism, but I felt instinctively that you had one. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you're not inattentive.
Oh, I am afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. You see, my metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet.
We do not expect him to Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes, he usually likes to spend his Sundays in London. He is not one of those who solely miss enjoyment, as, by all accounts, that unfortunate young man his brother seems to be. But I must not disturb you any longer.
I think, dear doctor, I will take a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do us good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism. With pleasure.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, and horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing B. for the Albany. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that to you and Miss Prism in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Worthing to come here, and you had better speak to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I've never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he will look just like everybody else.
He does. You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm quite sure.
I'm afraid you must be under some strange mistake, for I'm not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. And you, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest, my wicked cousin Ernest.
Wicked? But I'm not wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think I'm wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I do hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
I have been rather reckless.
I'm so glad.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I've been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasant to being here with you.
I can't understand how you were here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
Well, that is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Wouldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one is to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But I still think you had better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He's gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. There's no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you'll require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, at dinner on Wednesday night, Uncle Jack said that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh well, the accounts I've received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make it your mission, if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I have no time this afternoon.
Would you mind my reforming myself then this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me! I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
I might have buttonhole first.
A maraschal meal?
No, I'd soon have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it could be right for you to say such things to me. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
And Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You were the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
Then they are a snare that every sensible man should like to be caught in.
I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You were too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. Mr. Worthing! This is indeed a surprise. We did not expect you till Monday afternoon.
I've returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you're well.
Oh, dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother!
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead!
Your brother Earnest, dead.
Yes, quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I'll trust he'll profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing you were always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults. But this is a sad, sad blow.
Yes, very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No. He died abroad. In Paris, in fact.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am particularly susceptible to draughts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? Oh, I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You will no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday.
Oh, that reminds me. You do christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I mean, you know how to christen, all right? I suppose you're continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in the parish. I've often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you're interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh yes, there usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. No, I'm quite fond of children. The fact is, I would like to be christened myself. This afternoon, if you've got nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way.
Oh,
Or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Oh, not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion.
Oh, you need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or at least I think advisable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might trot round about 5 if that would suit you.
Perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened along with other babies. That would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Wonderfully. And now, Mr. Worthing, I will no longer intrude into my house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to be a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack, I am pleased to see you back, but what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change.
Cecily!
Uncle Jack, what on earth is the matter? Do look happy. You look as though you had a toothache, and I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago. Come on, you know you have a brother.
I don't have a brother.
You can't pretend you don't know him. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him, could you? I'll tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we'd all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to be particularly distressing.
My brother in the dining room. I don't know what it means. I think it's perfectly absurd.
Brother, I have come down from town to tell you how very sorry I am for all the trouble I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here perfectly disgraceful. He knows very well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everybody. Why, Ernest has just been telling me all about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often.
He's been telling you about Mr. Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Well, I won't have him talking to you about Bunbury or anything else. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit the faults were all on my side, but Brother John's coldness to me seems peculiarly painful. Considering it's the first time I've come here, I expected more enthusiastic welcome.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me.
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It's pleasant, is it not? To see so perfect a reconciliation. I suggest we leave the 2 brothers alone.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You've done a wonderful thing here today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
Elgin, you young scoundrel, you have to get out of here at once. I don't allow any Bunbury in here.
I have put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to your own, sir. I suppose that's all right.
His things?
Yes, sir. Mr. Ernest's luggage. I've unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has suddenly been called to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have. Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
And my duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
Well, I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily's a darling.
I won't have you talking about Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. I think you look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why don't you go up and get changed? It's very childish to read deep mourning for a man who is actually staying for a whole week with you at your house. Yes.
You're not staying with me for a whole week in my house as a guest or anything else. You've got to leave.
I certainly won't leave you so long as you're in mourning. You'd be most unkind. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I should think it very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you leave if I change my clothes?
If you were not too long, I never saw anybody take so long to get dressed with such little result.
Well, that is better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally overdressed, I always make up for it by being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. But you've got to leave by the 4:05 train, and I hope you have a pleasant journey back to London. This bunburying, as you call it, has not been of great success to you.
Well, I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that's all that matters. But I must see her before I go and make arrangements for another bunbury. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order a dog cart for me.
Is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. It will be a most painful parting.
It is always very painful to part from people one has known a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog car is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
Cecily, I hope I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be the very visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Oh, do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it, may I?
Oh, no, I couldn't let you. It is merely a young girl's record of her own thoughts and recollections, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I do hope you will order a copy, but pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking you down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I looked upon your wonderful, incomparable beauty, I've dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should say that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily,
The dog car is waiting, sir.
tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
I don't think Uncle Jack would approve of your staying on till next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anyone in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You'll marry me, won't you?
Of course. Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months.
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
And how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And, of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you. And the next day I bought this ring in your name. And this is the bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Oh, did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes. You've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always led for your leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my own dear sweet Cecily, I have not written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that. I remember only too well I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week and sometimes oftener.
Do let me read them, Cecily.
I couldn't let you. They would make you fart you conceited. The 3 you wrote to me after I had broken off our engagement are so beautiful, so badly spelled, that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was, on the 22nd of last March. Today I broke off my engagement with Earnest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
Why on earth did you break us off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all, Cecily. I'm very much hurt indeed to hear you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect little angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally, does it?
Yes, darling, with a little help from others. You'll never break off our engagement again, Cecily.
I don't think I could break it off now that I have actually met you. And there is, of course, the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires one with absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
But do you mean to say, dear child, that you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
I don't like the name of Algernon.
My dear, sweet, loving little darling. I can see no possible reason for you disliking the name. It's not at all a bad name. In fact, it is a rather aristocratic name. Half the chaps to get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you. I might admire your character, but I feel as though I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the practice of all the rites and ceremonies of the church?
Yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him on a most important christening. I mean, on a most important business.
Oh,
I shan't be away more than half an hour.
considering that we have been engaged for the last 3 months' time, I think it is rather hard that you should leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is, and I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax has called to see a Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Ask Miss Fairfax to come here, and you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack and his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew? What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we're going to be great friends. Why? I like you more than I can already say. And my first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we have known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray, sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
If you wish.
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
With pleasure.
Then that is all quite settled.
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Yes. I am glad to say that outside the family circle, Papa is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. Cecily, Mamma's views on education, which are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. Do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Not at all, Gwendolyn. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
No, I live here.
Oh, your mother or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
No, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
Yes, my guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I'm Mr. Worthing Ford.
Oh, it is strange. He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. Although, I cannot say that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. Cecily, I have liked you well since I met you. But now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help but feel a wish to point out that you are, well, a little older than you seem to be and not quite so alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Oh, pray do. I think that when one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candour, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong and upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honesty. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the most noble possible moral character are susceptible to the physical influences of others.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn. Did you say Ernest?
Yes?
But it is not Ernest who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Oh, he never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. In fact, now that I think of it, I've never really heard any man mention his brother before. The subject seems distasteful to most. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was beginning to grow almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours. Although you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Earnest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
My dearest Gwendolyn, I see no reason why I should make it a secret of you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
Oh, there must be some slight error. But Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you must be under some strange mistake, for Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for Ernest proposed to me at yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid that I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolyn, if it caused you any physical or mental anguish, but I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gotten himself into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
Well, I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay the tea as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity?
Yes,
Cardew?
a great many. From one of the hills it's quite close. One can see 5 counties.
5 counties? Oh, I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
Yes, I suppose that is why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden you have, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea that there were so many flowers in the country.
Flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London. May I offer you some tea?
Thank you, detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Well then. Cake or bread and butter?
Oh, bread and butter, thank you. Cake is rarely seen in the best households nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I most distinctly asked for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the kindness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor innocent trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
I felt that you were false and deceitful from the moment that I saw you. I am never deceived in such manners. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many calls of a similar character to make in the neighbourhood.
Ernest! Ernest, stop. A moment. Are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To do little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea in your pretty little head?
You may.
I knew there must be some mistake. The man whose arm is at present around your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
Your guardian?
Yes, this is Uncle Jack.
Jack? Oh!
Here is Ernest. A moment. Tell me, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
What young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn!
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean, to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea in your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there must be some slight error. But the man whose arm is currently around your shoulder is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh. Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really Jack?
I could deny it if I wanted. I could deny anything if I wanted. But my name is Jack. It's been Jack for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on the both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, won't you?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
Yes. Mr. Worthing. There is just one question we would like to be permitted to ask you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to Earnest, and it is of some great importance to both of us to know where he is at present.
Gwen, so, it pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you. Indeed, it's the first time in my life I've ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I'm really quite inexperienced at doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I have never had a brother in my life. And I have not the smallest intention of ever having a brother in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Not even of any kind?
No brother. Not even of any kind.
It is obvious that neither of us is engaged to anyone.
No, it is not a very pleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
No, let us venture back into the house. They will hardly dare to follow us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of affairs is what you call bunburying, I suppose.
Yes. What wonderful Bunbury it is too. The most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Well, you've no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has a right to Bunbury wherever one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist? Good heavens.
One must be serious in something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunbury. Something that you are serious about. I haven't the remotest idea. About everything, I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this affair is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to get down to the country quite so often as you used to do.
Your brother is looking a little off colour, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked customers. And not a bad thing.
And as for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say, your taking in a sweet, simple, innocent young girl like that is perfectly disgraceful. Not to mention the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defence for your deceiving the brilliant, clever, and thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I simply wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn. I love her.
I simply want to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
Well, I don't see much chance of you and Gwendolyn ever getting married.
I don't think there's much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax ever being united.
Well, that is no business of yours.
If it was any of my business, I wouldn't be talking about it. It's very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties.
How can you sit there, calmly eating muffins, when we're in this terrible trouble? I can't quite make it out. You seem to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The blood will probably get all over my calves. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. This is the only way to eat them.
I think it's perfectly heartless you eating more under the circumstances.
When I am unhappy, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I'm in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except for food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating because I am unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that is no reason you should eat them all in that greedy way.
I wish we'd have tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Can't a man eat his own muffins in his own garden?
But you've just said it's perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but muffins are the same.
Algernon, I have asked you to go. Why don't you go?
No, you can't ask me to go without having my dinner. That's absurd. I never go without having my dinner. Nobody ever does. Except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear boy, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. For I've made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:30. And naturally I will take the name of Earnest. Gwendolyn would wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest. That would be absurd. Besides, I've a perfect right to be christened if I like. There's no record I was ever christened by anybody, and I think it extremely probable I never was. And so does Dr. Chasuble. It's a very different thing in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened for years.
But Algernon, you have been christened, and that is the important thing.
Quite so. So no my constitution can stand it.
That is nonsense.
Jack, you are at the muffins again. I told you, I was particularly fond of muffins, and there are only 2 left.
Algernon, I have asked you to leave. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet. Besides, there's only 1 muffin left.
That's if they did not follow us into their house at once, like most men would have. Seems to show me that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly, it is the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we shall not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing! There is something very particular on which I would like to ask you, and much depends on your reply.
Gwendolyn, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order to have an opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, if you can believe him, dear.
Oh, I don't. But that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
Very true. In matters of grave importance, it is style, not sincerity. That is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer me for pretending to have a brother? Was it so that you might have an opportunity of coming to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the situation, but I intend to crush them. Their answers certainly seem satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That one seems to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
So, do you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no.
No, you are quite right. There are principles at stake that cannot be surrendered. Which one of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea, Miss Cardew. Why, I almost always speak at the same time as everybody else. Won't you take the time from me?
Certainly.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we're going to be christened this afternoon.
For me, you're prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me, you're prepared to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
It is absurd to talk about the inequality of sexes, but when questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage that us females know absolutely nothing about. My darling, Gwendolyn.
Darling. Lady Bracknell.
Gwendolyn, what does this mean? Meaning that I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma. Come here. Sit down. Mr. Worthing. Gwendolyn's unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him in any question I would consider it wrong. But you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter will cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. Now, as regards to Algernon. Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
may I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend Mr. Bunbury resides?
Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury's somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury's dead.
When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
I killed Bunbury off this afternoon. I mean, Bunbury died this afternoon. Yes.
And what did he die of?
Bunbury, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of some revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
What I mean, Aunt Augusta, is Bunbury was found out. Yes, the doctors found out that Bunbury could no longer live. So, Bunbury's dead.
Well, he seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at last to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. Now that we have finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew is holding in what seems to be a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
This is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know if there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air around this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that appear to go on seems to be considerably above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all related to any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew, of 149 Belgrave Square, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire.
That is not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses has always inspired confidence, even in tradesmen.
I have carefully preserved the court records of the period. They are open for your inspection. I have also in my possession records of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
Yes, life crowded with incident, I see. I, for one, am not in favour of premature experiences. Come, Gwendolyn, the time approaches for our departure. We've not a moment to lose. I suppose, Mr. Worthing, as a matter of form, I had better ask if our Miss Cardew has any little fortune?
About £130,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000, you say?
Yes, Lady
Well, Miss Cardew seems to be a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. Very few girls these days have any really solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come over here, sweet child. Pretty girl. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair looks almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter that. Can you turn around, sweet child? No, the side view is what I want. Yes, it is quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile, Miss Cardew. The 2 weak points in our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Style these days largely depends on the way the chin is worn, and they are worn very high at present. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily's the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't care a tuppence about social possibilities.
No, Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Now, my dear, you must know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
You will also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Quite fond of you.
Marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
I, for one, am not in favour of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character, which I think is never advisable.
Pardon me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you. But the fact is, this engagement is quite out of the question. You see, I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes legally of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say ostentatiously eligible young man. He looks nothing, yet he has what more could one desire?
I'm afraid, Lady Bracknell, that I don't... It pains me very much to speak frankly to you, but I don't approve at all of his moral character. No, the fact is, I suspect him of being untruthful.
My nephew Algernon? Impossible, he went to Oxford.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London, on important question, he obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier Jouer wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful reception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is, he was perfectly well aware from the first that I have no brother, that I never had a brother, and that I have not the smallest intention of ever having a brother in the future. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct onto you.
Well, that is very kind of you, Lady Bracken. But the fact is, my decision on the subject remains unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come over here, dear. How old are you, child?
Well, I'm really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You're quite right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, a lady should never be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at dinner parties. Well, my dear, it will not be long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage, so I do not think that your guardian's consent is a matter of any importance after all.
Pardon me for interrupting you again, Lady Bracknell, but I think it's only fair to tell you that according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew doesn't come legally of age until she is 35.
Well, that does not seem to be a seriously grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. Indeed, London society is full of women of the highest birth who have of their own free choice remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To To my own knowledge, she has remained 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was many years ago now. So I see no reason why our dear Miss Cardew should be still more attractive at the age you mention than she is at present.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I'm not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others. And waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Then what is to be done?
I don't know.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait until she is 35, a statement which I am bound to say shows a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Brenda, I will allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware, Mr. Worthing, that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can decide for himself. Come, my dear, we have missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
Christening, sir. Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these men here have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses.
Well, I will return to the church at once then. Indeed, I have just been informed that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I'm on my way to join her now.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be one of vital importance to myself and Lord Bracknell. Is this Miss Prism a female of somewhat repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, she is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
Yes, it is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she held in this household?
For the last 3 years, Miss Prism has been Miss Cardew's governess and esteemed companion.
Yes, in spite of what I hear of her, I must see her. Let her be sent for.
She approaches and she is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, Deacon. I've been waiting for you there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism! Prism, come here. Years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house at 104 Upper Clover Street in charge of a perambulator that contained an infant of the male sex. You never returned. Several weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered standing by itself in a remote corner at Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On that morning of that day you mentioned, a day that is forever branded in my memory, I prepared to take the baby out in his perambulator. I had brought with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag, in which I intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written in my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I can never forgive myself for, I placed the manuscript in the bassinet and the baby in the handbag.
But
Miss Prism, where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
The cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations.
Which railway station?
Victoria, the Brighton line.
Gwendolyn, wait here for me.
If you are not too long, my love, I will wait for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that families of high position, coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered a thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian is one of a very emotional nature.
I dislike his noise. It sounds almost as if he were having an argument, and I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
The noise, it has stopped now.
I wish you would have added some conclusion. The suspense! Oh, isn't it terrible? Oh, I do hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Lady Bracknell? Examine it carefully before you give your reply. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes. Here is the injury it received in the upsetting of the Gower Street in younger and happier days. Here, in the lining, is a stain caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage. An incident that had occurred in Leamington. And here, on the locket, are my initials. I'd forgotten that in an extravagant mood I placed them there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I am so happy to have it unexpectedly restored to me. It's been a great inconvenience, being without it all these years.
But more is restored to you today than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes, Mother, I am unmarried! I admit, this is a serious blow. But then, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why have one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell. I hate to seem inquisitive, but could you tell me who it is that I am?
The news I have to give you, Mr. Worthing, will not altogether please you. You are the eldest son of my unfortunate sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have doubted I had a brother? Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you will have to treat me with more respect in the future. You've never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Not till today, old boy. I admit, however, I was out of practice.
Ernest, my own. But who are you? Who are you now that you are someone else?
Your decision on the subject is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
Then I suppose the matter had best be cleared up at once. Lady Bracknell, at the time of my being abandoned in a handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could afford, including christening, was lavished upon you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. But what name was I given?
Well, being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, Lady Bracknell, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at present remember what the General's Christian name was, but I have no doubt he had one.
Elgie! Can't you recall our own father's Christian name?
Oh, my dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army list of the rest of the period, I suppose.
The General was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I have no doubt that his name would appear in any military directory.
The army records of the last 40 years are here. They should have been my constant study. M. Merriman! M. Magley, Maxwell, Milan. Migsby, Marksby, Mobbs. Oh, what ghastly names they all have. Moncrief, Lieutenant General, Lieutenant Colonel, 1840. General. Earnest General. Then my name is Earnest after all.
Yes, I remember now that the General's Christian name was Earnest.
I mean, naturally it is Earnest.
Yes, I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, oh my own Ernest, I felt from the moment I met you that you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, it's a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he's been speaking nothing but the truth. But can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change. My own one.
At last.
Letitia.
Cecily lost!
Gwendolyn.
My love.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta. For the first time in my life, I've discovered the vital importance of being earnest.
Dedication to this team and the production of this play, and without her, none of this would have been possible, and she's just made this a great experience for all of us to be a part of. And so yeah, thank you. She's been a wonderful stage manager / assistant director, always keeping us troublemakers in line and under control. Also, she's responsible for making everything on and off the stage run smoothly, and she's just been wonderful. So thank you.
I would like to say a huge thank you to Robert. Come here, please. Robert has done an amazing job running the netball stand, where the food was, she actually made dinner for us every night. which was lovely, and we'd just like to thank her.
We'll make this the final speech unless anyone has anything else they want to say. I'm just going to say a few words, not many. This production, which I've wanted to do for a long time, has actually exceeded my expectations. It just looks gorgeous, and you can see these are astounding performers, and it's a really difficult play to do. It's a comedy and it's dialogue rich. It's, as you see, it's a lot of lines to learn, and I've worked them hard, but they've really responded. I'm incredibly proud of the production, I can't tell you, and so I'd just like to give you to give them one last round of applause, because I think they've been amazing.